Flare gun is a mix of tool and weapon in Terraria. It is obtainable fairly early in the game and is quite a useful tool for most of the playthrough, unless you chuck down shine potions like a freaking addict. As it is a mix of tool with weapon properties, flare gun can be used in different scenarios: exploration, damage dealing, and even marking enemies. But of course it shines the best as a light source, and the biggest competition it has is the glow stick. But for a long time now I have been seeing people online complain about flare gun, and there are even some who find it a complete disappointment when they get it from a chest. But is it really a useless item, or maybe it's a hidden gem? Flare gun is an early game item which can only be found in gold chests. Every underground gold chest has a 5% chance to contain the item, and for the cavern layer the chance goes up to roughly 15%. And since you can get a flare gun without even killing a single boss, progression wise it goes right around here in the middle of early pre-hard mode. Once found in a gold chest it comes as a bundle with its flares, so don't worry about the chest scamming you. But by the time you get a flare gun you probably already have some glow sticks and of course much better options for an actual weapon. So then why would you use it instead? Let's start with the main ability of flare gun as a light source and compare it to glow stick. Glow sticks can be found in pots and chests all around the map, which means they are overall much more obtainable compared to flare gun, and you can also easily purchase glow sticks for 10 copper each from merchant at night. So all you need is a simple home and some money to get the glow sticks. But once you find the flare gun, the merchant starts selling flares for 7 copper each, which is cheaper than glow sticks, but a 3 copper difference probably won't matter a lot unless you are planning to rain flares down on your teammates to annoy them. The most obvious difference between the two items is of course the projectile behavior. While flares are shot fast and travel a longer distance before dropping, glow sticks are thrown like you are throwing trash. A quick test throwing both of them from the same point and angle shows that glow sticks aren't made for distance. And I didn't even know flares could travel this far, but it is clear that if you need distance and velocity, flare gun is the choice. Terraria isn't made in a way where all light sources are equal. A light pad can be brighter than the other, or a specific torch can be dimmer than others. In fact, a quick glance at the almighty torch chart will show you the brightness of them, and anyone who uses blue torches are lunatics. Since we know the light area can be different, let's compare the stick and the flare in this arena. Throwing both of them at the same place shows that the glow sticks are slightly brighter. It is not a big difference, but you can see the faraway dirt block better with a glow stick. So it is safe to say glow sticks light up just a bit bigger area. By the way, in the brightness test I have not checked the other types of sticks and flares because most people just use the default ones. But since I mentioned the types, let's quickly go over them. Both of the items have different versions, so you may want to consider them too. For glow sticks there is the bouncy pink one. There is Spelunker glow stick, which shows the ores and treasure around you and is quite useful to be honest. Sticky glow stick that every stick enjoyer loves and uses as much as the normal version. And of course the most recently added fairy ones sold by zoologists. They hover over the point they land and are quite useful at their job of lighting the place. For the flares there is blue flare, which is just blue, really. Shimmer flares, which are just purple. I mean, I love the way they look, but I'd really expect more from shimmer made flares. Spelunker flare working the same as their glow stick brothers, and cursed flare inflicting the cursed inferno debuff instead of simple burning. But of course there is one final flare, the flare of all flares, the most difficult to get and the most important one, the rave flare. I'm kidding, it is the rainbow flare, but apparently I really should use it more often in my playthroughs. I mean, look at this. So if all you want is a simple throwable light source, flare gun gives more distance with slightly cheaper price, and glow sticks give some versatility with its variations, especially the bouncy and fairy sticks. But of course flare gun has a weapon part to it too. But is it anything useful? Flare gun shoots a flare dealing 3 damage to enemies which cannot be increased in any way possible. But the projectile has infinite piercing and burns with 100% chance. This is important because not all projectiles in early game have definite chance to burn stuff. As an example, the easiest way to inflict the debuff is fire arrow, which only has 1 in 3 chance. The first question to answer is the debuff useful against bosses? I have fought both Eye of Cthulhu and King Slime on expert mode with a musket to test this. At first kill I only used the musket, and in the second kills I tried to keep the burning debuff on by constantly changing to flares. As you can see in the times, there is not really a difference. Any time lost by changing to flare gun is added as DPS, so in damage department it doesn't really make any difference. But if you are not using a 100 portion or fighting in a well lit arena, then the burning helps a ton for seeing the bosses at night. But of course, flares also have infinite piercing. A boss like Eater of Worlds or Brain of Tulu will be suffering a lot of damage if you land a good shot. That means 80 damage per second to Brain of Tulu with the debuff alone. And even though unlikely, a whopping 288 DPS on Eater of Worlds. Apart from bosses, flare gun is also useful for goblin invasion. It helps you stagger faraway archers and mages to stop their attacks, or burn a lot of goblins with a single hit. Though, since they keep spawning one after another, it is probably better to simply whack them on the head with actual weapons. Flare gun is a useful tool all around, whether it be for exploration or burning stuff for some extra damage and visibility. It is not obviously better or worse than a glow stick, and the damage it adds is questionable. But since you can easily swap to it with the shift button, it has its uses for combat too. Personally, I am one of the players who welcome flare gun with a smile when I get it in a chest. Daedalus Stormbow is a fan favorite weapon for early hard mode in Terraria. Most ranged players go for it as soon as possible after defeating Wall of Flesh, and that is for good reason. This beast of a bow shreds the destroyer, and of course it is super good for other mech bosses too. And back in the 1.4 update, Terraria introduced the little brother of this weapon, called Blood Rainbow. Unlike its shiny big brother, Blood Rainbow remained much more obscure. Thanks to the method for dropping it being hidden in such a complicated process, I am sure there are players out there who don't even know this weapon exists, or at least they never used it. But what if it's a mistake to ignore such an item? After all, it takes one of the best ranged weapons as an inspiration and brings it to an earlier stage. Not only that, but it also looks sick as hell. So the question remains, is it a useless item, or maybe it's a hidden gem? Blood Rainbow has no recipe, so if you want to get it, you need to drop it, and unfortunately that is also the worst part of this weapon. Its performance doesn't matter a whole lot when the way to get it would drive players away from it. First, you need to wait until a blood moon and then go fishing. Yeah, if you are lucky, you will catch a wandering eye fish or zombie merman. Both of them are actually enemies that have high HP, high defense and high damage, so good luck fighting them with any early game gear you have. I recommend trapping these bloody guys in an enclosed area and hit from an opening. Even then it will take a long time to catch and kill a single enemy, so if you are not lucky it may take several blood moons to get Blood Rainbow, as it has a measly 12.5% chance to drop. Now you see why I was saying that people don't bother with it. But the good point is, you can get it as a drop in the very early game since Blood Moon doesn't require any boss skill, so progression wise it goes right around here in the early pre-hard mode. But Blood Rainbow is not like the other bows that you know. Instead of shooting arrows, it summons red projectiles from top of the screen down on enemies. So 1. Projectile behavior is obviously different, which we will cover in a bit, and 2. Since it turns arrows into blood, you cannot use special arrow effects. I have tried all the pre-hard mode arrows and the only difference is a change in damage. You can see an average DPS per arrow type on screen now, but take it with a grain of salt, because each use of this bow shoots between 1 to 3 projectiles, so the damage can vary a lot while using it. But since we talked about the projectiles, let's go over the behavior of them. Whenever you shoot, 1, 2 or 3 blood bolts rain down on the cursor. One important point here is that the projectiles do not spawn from the middle of the screen, but instead where the cursor is, so if you are planning to use the weapon, keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that this weapon has shit accuracy, and God bless your poor soul if you want to hit any small enemy because you will miss a lot. I even tried to increase the accuracy by using a gravitation potion in hopes that it will confuse the game and projectiles will spawn from somewhere else, but nope, they act like everything is perfectly normal. Now if there is one thing we have to talk about when it comes to weapons that rain down projectiles, it is the underground performance. A weapon that you get in early game needs to perform well in the caves because you will spend a lot of your time there. That is why a weapon like Star Fury has its projectile travel through blocks. So I expect Blood Rainbow to do the same and be super useful below surface level. After all, we worked so hard to get it right. Ha, I don't even know where I am hitting right now, but I know it's not the enemies. Oh look, after trying for a minute I killed a slime, yay! Well, at least now we know the surface is where we will be using this bow. Since now we know that Blood Rainbow is not very useful underground, and its low accuracy makes it difficult to hit any normal enemy, it is safe to say that the best use of Blood Rainbow is against bosses. I have tried using it against King Slime, Eye of Cthulhu, Brain of Cthulhu and Eater of Worlds. You can see the times it took me to kill them on the screen with some basic gear. To be honest, the DPS and kill times were quite good. Thanks to the projectiles quickly raining down on bosses, it is easier to hit them compared to a normal bow and the damage is quite high. When it spawns 2 or 3 projectiles, it is also useful to clear spawns of the boss. But these times alone don't give us a whole lot of information. What we need is a comparison with other weapons. So I choose Eater of Worlds for the DPS test. and the weapons I chose were from the same damage type and progression points, so we have Gold Bow with Jester's Arrows, Musket, Mini Shark and Boomstick. All of them are obtainable before killing any boss, and even though Boomstick is a bit of a progression skipper, a lot of people use it, so it is only fair to cover that here. And to my surprise, Blood Rainbow has given a pretty good result. Of course, it can't compare against Jester's Arrows when the target is either of worlds, but there is only a 20-second difference. And to be honest, I am also surprised how much time it took me to kill either of worlds with a musket. I will normally just use that for this job, but I guess even a Mini Shark is better on expert difficulty. If you don't have a lot of stars to use for Jester's Arrows or do not want to dive into damned jungle so early in the game, Blood Rainbow looks to be a pretty good ranged weapon against bosses in this part of the game. So in the end, if you are willing to spend some time chilling and fishing in Blood Moon and hope to not get murdered by whatever you catch, Blood Rainbow is a ranged weapon that you can go for. Of course, I strongly advise against trying to use it for normal mobs and can't even imagine how you would use it underground, but if you need something to kill early bosses with, then it is very well worth the effort to get it. I fish a lot in early Blood Moons, especially for the other drops from the monsters, such as Manitou, and if I get a Blood Rainbow, now I know what to use it for. Imagine you have a neighbor right next to your room. They are noisy, they are annoying, and you would give anything to slap them right on the face then and there. But the wall between is keeping your slaps from reaching them. That's exactly where every Terrarian's dreams come true with Crystal Wild Shard. But instead of a satisfying slap, you will need to do with a stun-locking magical lance that is filled with neighborly love. Jokes aside, Crystal Wild Shard doesn't only look beautiful, it also packs quite a punch. However, due to where it drops from and people's expectations from that monster, it is usually not a very welcomed item. But if you're a mage player, would you use it or skip it for other options? In the end, is Crystal Wild Shard a useless item, or is it a hidden gem? Crystal Wild Shard is a hard mode magic weapon dropped by Hallowed Mimics. Since Hallow spreads as soon as you enter hard mode and Hallowed Mimics starts spawning, you can get this item right after killing Wall of Flesh. Which means Crystal Wild Shard goes under early hard mode in our progression line. But you still need to find Hallowed Mimics and be able to kill them, because these guys are not only super rare, but they're also difficult as hell. You can find them randomly in underground hollow biome and try to fight them there, but since they have a huge health pool and deal tons of damage, it is best if you have an open area before touching one. Or you can play smart and spawn them in a much safer place. Gather 15 souls of light in underground hollow and craft them into a key of light with a workbench. Place the key in an empty chest and be prepared to get licked. If you are lucky, you will get Crystal Wild Shard from Hallowed Mimic with 25% chance. So then what can this purple magic stick do? When you use Crystal Wild Shard, it will consume 13 mana to create a magical spike. The spike lingers for a while and keeps hitting all enemies inside continuously. This attack ranges from 16 to 18 tiles, and I have no idea why there is even a distance randomization here, but one important point to keep in mind is that the head is the best part. And by that, I mean the tip of the attack deals 25% more damage than the rest. If you absolutely want to min-max your DPS, be my guest to do a just the tip challenge. If all you want is big damage, however, Crystal Wild Shard may not be the best option for you, as there are harder hitting magic weapons in early hard mode. But that doesn't mean the Indigo Magic Stick is a weak weapon. The damage output is actually more than enough for any early hard mode enemy, and the damage is even better than what you see in the tooltip, as Crystal Wild Shard actually has a hidden armor penetration stat of 10, which means extra 5 damage to most enemies compared to not having any armor penetration. But of course, we still have not talked about the most important part of this pink magic stick. Start of hard mode is where you will be spending a ton of time underground, and many weapons in this stage of the game cannot pierce through walls. Pair this with an increasing number of enemy types and stuff that can travel through blocks, and you get the problem. Crystal Wild Shard is an absolute gift for underground exploration, as you can simply ignore walls to attack. The range isn't the best, but you don't need range when the enemy can't even touch you. And even if you are directly in front of a mob, you can easily stunlock it with Crystal Wild Shard thanks to its perfect knockback and quick hits. So now that we know it is a perfectly useful weapon for underground exploration, it is time to check how it fares against bosses. Before doing this test, I never used Crystal Wild Shard in boss fights because of its short range and non-optimal damage, but test results actually changed my mind. I have fought against Destroyer, Queen Slime, Twins, and Skeleton Prime to test the Magenta Magic Stick, and these are the kill times. It took me 5 tries to kill the Destroyer, and I died to other bosses at least once or twice. So once again, Crystal Wild Shard is not the safest weapon for boss fights, but holy hell, it took 1.5 minutes to kill the Destroyer, and it wasn't even the best run I had. Even without comparing this to other weapons, I can easily say that this weapon absolutely shredded the Metal Worm. But for the other 3 bosses, I wouldn't ever try to use it again. Even if the damage was high, trying to land a shot on twins was like a stupid trial of patience. Apart from massacring the destroyer, Crystal Wildshard isn't a weapon you want to do bosses with. But what better way is there to compare weapons than to kill some bosses with them? So I chose weapons from the same progression point and damage type, which are Meteor Staff, Spirit Flame, Golden Shower, Magic Dagger, Sky Fracture and Crystal Serpent. For the target practice boss, I have chosen Destroyer, specifically because that is the only one Crystal Wildshard is strong against and the only boss I personally would use it for. And these are the times it took me to kill the Destroyer with the weapons. First of all, I am still surprised that the Violet Magic Stick only took 130. It is absolutely the best weapon if you can take the risk in the fight, and I really wouldn't recommend doing that in Master Mode or higher difficulties. To be honest, I didn't know Spirit Flame would do this well, but the flames it spawns do area damage which hits Destroyer a lot per flame. And I'm glad I checked Golden Shower. Most people think it's just a support weapon, but you can see here that it did perfectly well here even though Destroyer doesn't get affected by its debuff. On the other hand, we have the absolute worst options, Sky Fracture and Crystal Serpent, which I won't ever use against Destroyer again. Crystal Wildshard is a very specific weapon with a very specific place to drop. In my mage playthroughs, I do try my luck against hallowed mimics, and if I get the item, I use it a lot while exploring. But if you ask me if I would grind it for 5 or more tries from the mimics, probably not. Hard mode is where mages start to shine and start having a lot of options, so even if I enjoy using this weapon a lot, I wouldn't especially grind for it. And now, I know that if I get a Crystal Wildshard, I am definitely going to murder that metal worm with this, even if it takes me a few tries. Terraria has an incredible progression system and hard mode is where it shines the most. It gives a lot of new toys for the player to have fun with. Magic goes explosive, range finally starts getting fun, and melee becomes range. But among all those options there is still one thing that I can't help but ask, why? KO Cannon is a hard mode melee weapon with a few gimmicks, but the biggest one is being used even less than the Pearlwood Sword. In fact, it is so unpopular that people don't even use it as a challenge weapon. A quick search on YouTube gets you videos like, I beat Terraria with a copper short sword, or can you kill the destroyer in master mode with a Pearlwood Sword? But if you search KO Cannon, the only thing you will find is a Socrates review video with a huge F tier slapped on it. But in any case, KO Cannon is still a hard mode weapon, and even if it's not the strongest option out there, it might have some uses. In the end, we need to test it out and see if KO Cannon is a useless item, or is it a hidden gem. Hello to everyone watching this, I am... You know what? Forget about the intro. I know it sucks, you know it sucks, everybody knows it sucks. If devs shoved some love to it, KO Cannon could be an okay cannon, but right now it is at best a meh cannon and at worst a bad cannon. In fact, not even the developers seem to love it, as after its introduction in 1.2, all it received was a damage buff of 5. Those were the times when this item was a rare drop in Blood Moon, but right now it is not even that. KO Cannon at least had that going for it, but now it is not even a rare drop that you can brag about on Reddit after being the 1 millionth player to get a rare drop. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Even if a weapon is weak, it is only fair to cover it unbiased. So let's see what this trash puncher can do. KO Cannon is a hard mode Blood Moon item. If you want to get it, you need to either wait until a Blood Moon happens, or use a Bloody Tear to start it. After the event starts, there is a chance for an uncommon enemy to spawn, which is the Clown. Clown can deal a ton of damage with its explosives and has quite a high HP, so be careful if you are dealing with it. And once you defeat the enemy, if you are lucky you will get Banana Ring, which is much better than KO Cannon in all points. And if you are unlucky you will get the weapon this video is about with 20% chance. Since you can obtain it right after killing Wall of Flesh, it goes into the early hard mode in the progression line right around here. KO Cannon is a flail and acts like how Chain Knife or Harpoon does. It sends out a projectile with a maximum range of 15 tiles and immediately returns back whenever it hits something. Which means you get minimum attack speed at max range and maximum attack speed when you are point blank to the enemy. This of course greatly affects the DPS. With no accessories and armors equipped, I barely could reach 100 DPS at max range, and the attack speed is so slow it feels like trying to run in a dream, but you just can't move an inch from where you are. But when you move into the melee range, the DPS rises up to 2.5 times, and that is actually not bad at all, if you are okay with getting in the kissing range to the enemy, that is. So if you are trying to use it, it is a no-brainer that you should get as close to the enemy as possible. I have also tested the weapon in actual scenarios and delved into the caves. In any point where there are only a few enemies, KO Cannon does more than enough to clean the place. But like most weapons where you need to be up close while using them, any ranged enemy creates a huge issue. Unfortunately for KO Cannon, it also sucks for group fights since it is a single target weapon. So if you are attacked by a group, you simply just perish. This is also true for many ranged weapons, but at least they are ranged. KO Cannon on the other hand is just sad. Now then, normally this would be the part where I test the weapon on a few bosses and then compare it to the others. But I believe we all can agree here that bosses are not included in the list of KO Cannon use cases. That's why we will be taking the classic approach with dummy targets and compare it to some other weapons in the same progression point and damage type, which are Flaying Knife, Shadow Flame Knife, Chick, and Chain Guillotines. Since KO Cannon is such a special weapon, it also gets a very special treatment from me, where I include two weapons from pre-hard mode to this comparison, Knight's Edge and Sun Fury. You can see the results for the single dummy test on screen. I have used KO Cannon on both max and min range and just took an average. To be honest, I am glad it at least beats Sun Fury and Knight's Edge in this test, though you will still need to be pretty close to the enemy to get this number. But of course these are all just dummy target results. In a real scenario the enemy won't stay there and keep taking a beating. But since we are doing this comparison for non-boss scenarios, let's also check multi-dummy test results. Well, I believe the list speaks for itself. Of course, in a real fight you won't be hitting all 8 targets with each of your flaying knife swings or throws of Sun Fury, but this shows the potential of damage for these weapons, while the said cannon doesn't see much increase in a multi-target test. Attentive people may have noticed chain guillotines have the same damage as the previous test, which is to be expected given its single target nature. But unlike KO Cannon, you can throw chain guillotines much further and damage everything on the return trip, which gives it a huge damage boost against groups of enemies. Once again, KO Cannon isn't for bosses, but what if you tried to? Well, obvious results really. I can't imagine any sane person trying to use this against Destroyer or Twins. It doesn't even reach the damned eyeball. But Skeleton Prime actually looks doable. In fact, without any modifiers on the weapon and accessories, I was able to get the boss to a low HP, but time was the main problem. I was actually going to stop trying further here, as I am not planning to use modifiers in any of the tests I do, but just out of curiosity. Can you defeat Skeletron Prime on Expert mode with a KO Cannon? Apparently yes, you can. With all warding accessories and the demonic modifier, I was able to kill the boss in 5 minutes and 43 seconds. I have also changed the flask to Cursed Flames, which may have helped on the win. But just because you can doesn't mean you should, really. Getting a Chick or Chain Guillotines in early hard mode is simply much easier, and the clear times for the boss with the same conditions were much faster, and the fight was much less stressful. I am not entirely sure if KO Cannon is a joke weapon, or if it was made to be a slight boost for hard mode if you somehow randomly drop it before getting anything else. The super low drop rate from years ago suggests that it wasn't made to be a serious weapon back then, but now that it is much more obtainable, maybe all it needs is a buff to be more viable. To be perfectly honest, I don't actually dislike KO Cannon. As a concept, I find quick return flails really fun, and this weapon is in a perfect place in progression for such a weapon. Maybe in 1.4.5 it will get some love from Relogic, and hopefully it will stop being an F-tier trash puncher. So you think Zenith is the strongest weapon of Terraria? Might you be missing on a hidden gem of a weapon that can surprise you? Nah, Zenith is just broken. Alright, let's try that with magic weapons. So you think Lunar Flare and Lost Prism are strongest magic weapons simply because they are post-Moon Lord? Yep, I mean they are endgame weapons. But if I ask you which is stronger, the literal goddess of the light with the sole purpose of eradicating impurity from the land including you, or this bubbly boy? The answer is obvious. Bubblegum is a really powerful magic weapon, but often overlooked by people for two reasons. First, it is dropped by an optional boss that not everyone is a fan of doing, and two, its range is short as f***. But if you were to actually use this, would it be just a useless item or a hidden gem? Let's test it out and see what this bubbly boy can do. Bubblegum is a hard mode magic weapon and it drops from Duke Fishron, which is an optional boss, and due to its difficulty it is considered post-Plantera or post-Golem. I say it is considered because you can actually fight it as soon as you enter hard mode. But unless you know what you are doing, I wouldn't really recommend it. And since the weapons you can get after killing Plantera is more than enough for Duke Fishron, especially for mages, I am going to put Bubblegum here in the pre-golem part of the progression line. To know where to drop the weapon is one thing, to fight the boss is another. Duke Fish Run is unique in its summoning method where you need to fish in the ocean to start the fight. But for that you need to use a special bait called truffle worm, which you can find in the underground glowing mushroom biomes. And these slimy things are cowards that run away from you if you don't catch them fast enough, so you get the idea why people don't always fight Duke Fish Run. If you are planning to grind the boss for drops, which I usually do, I recommend building a simple truffle worm farm like what you see on the screen now. Unless you want to chase these damn worms all around, of course. The fight itself is quite difficult if you are not used to it. Get yourself some high mobility items, especially some good wings or a flying mount, and a good weapon with either homing abilities or a high fire rate like Razor Pine for best chances at defeating it. And when you manage to take down the fishy pig, you have a 20% chance to get your prize. So then, what can this weapon do? Well, first of all, a ton of damage. Bubblegum has a pretty short range, especially for a magic weapon this late in the game. But what it loses in range is gained with mana efficiency and tons of damage. Actually, I was wondering how it fares against the Moonlord killing weapon, Nebula Blaze, and the results are quite surprising. If you could hit every single bubble to an enemy, you can reach 30% higher DPS compared to Nebula Blaze. Which tells me that if Bubblegun had some homing ability, it could very well be the strongest pre-Moonlord weapon in the game. Now that we talked about why this is the best magic weapon, I guess we also need to talk about the reason why no one uses it, and it is of course the short range of it. Bubblegun's maximum range is 28 tiles, but as you can see most bubbles don't really reach there and they also spread to a wide range. For a mage in late game, staying close to a boss in the range of Bubblegun can simply mean death. And there are not even a lot of bosses left if you are in pre-golem, which means even though it is a high risk high reward weapon, most people just prefer a low risk option. Alrighty then, it is once again the point where we test the weapon. I have used Bubblegun against Golem, Lunatic Cultist and Empress of Light. Also, since this is the point you may want to do Frost and Pumpkin Moon, I have also included Pumpkin and Ice Queen just for fun. And you see the kill times. Event bosses are obviously weaker than the other ones and don't take much to kill. And of course Golem is always going to be easy. But these times are really damn quick, especially for a boss that moves around so much like Empress of Light and Lunatic Cultist. It only took around 2 minutes or less, which shows that if you can take the risk, Bubblegun just threats the enemy. But it really should too, cause boy, that was a close call. But of course just looking at boss kill times with a single weapon doesn't give us a lot of information, so let's choose a single target and compare Bubblegun with other weapons. For this I initially planned to use Lunatic Cultist as target practice, but it wasn't a very good idea because, well, basically he is very small. Bubblegun's range and spread become a huge disadvantage when the boss is 3 pixels tall unless you decide to face tank the damage and get into his personal bubble. That's why we will be going with the big lady, Empress of Light instead. And the weapons I used are Razorblade Typhoon, Blizzard Staff, Night Glow, Stellar Tune, Laser Machine Gun and Heat Ray. And these are the times for each one. All of the weapons are from same progression point and I also included the 2 from Empress of Light to simply see if they are better or worse than Bubblegun. Surprisingly, Night Glow and Stellar Tune were pretty much the same on kill times, though much safer to use than Bubblegun. This shows that Empress of Light and Duke Fish Run drops are quite close in power. I'm actually surprised that Razorblade Typhoon has the fastest kill time, but to be honest it probably wouldn't be this way if I used a boss like Golem for the test. I am also surprised that Laser Machine Gun had a much better time than I would expect, while Heat Ray was much slower. This is why doing this test gives so much information compared to what you think you know. Also, since we already compared Bubblegun with a certain endgame weapon before, I also used it against Empress of Light to see if Bubblegun can compete with it, and no. Nebula Blaze is just stronger no matter how you cut it. Not because of simple DPS, but with range and homing abilities, it gets a much better time. In the end, Bubblegun is a great weapon, there is no questioning that, but whether it is actually useful or not depends on the player. It suffers from being a low range weapon in the late game where most players use safer weapons. If it had a bit of homing or less spread, it would be a more popular option for sure, but maybe that is asking too much for such a strong weapon. 1.4.4 increased the range of bubble gun, so who knows, maybe the final update will add something more. When you combine sentries and games, you end up with a lot of different stuff. But if you think of a sentry in Terraria, it is only this. And maybe this, but not really. These two also exist, but no one really cares about them, and people only know them because they wanted a Meow Mare and got this as a consolation prize. But there is of course one sentry the legends talk about, known for being the only pre-hard mode sentry that is not from Tavern Keep, and no one uses it. Houndius Shootius, even though it sounds like a certain name in a certain movie, is a sentry in Terraria. It is part of the Don't Starve crossover update and drops from a very specific boss, so it wouldn't be a surprise if most people don't know much about it. Without getting lost in the details, let's go and test it out and see what this eyeball toothpick can do. Back in 2021, Terraria released its crossover update with Don't Starve, which is an amazing game and I definitely recommend the single player version. The crossover brought a boss called Deerclops to Terraria, and to spawn it naturally you have to stay in snow biome exactly at midnight during a blizzard, or make and use a weird spawning item. So if you missed the boss in your playthrough, don't blame yourself. For a pre-hard mode boss, Deerclops actually has a lot of mechanics, but two things to keep in mind. 1. You can walk between its legs. And 2. Use warmth potion. The best thing about Deerclops is, unlike all other bosses in Terraria, it doesn't despawn when you die. So you can actually try to defeat it as soon as you can spawn it and throw yourself at it until it dies. And when you kill the boss, you have a 25% chance to get the eyeball on a stick, among many other things. I prefer to kill Deerclops before going for Skeletron, so Houndius Shootius goes to Skeletron in our progression line. Houndius Shootius is the earliest sentry you can get in the game. Well, technically you can buy the Dungeon Defender sentries earlier, but they don't work outside Old Man's army if you have not defeated it yet. And I'm not seeing anyone doing that before killing a Deerclops. What this toothpick can do, however, is shooting a single target attack very slowly. Unfortunately, being a sentry in this game means not doing a lot of DPS. So I went and tested out all early sentries against some enemies. Normally I would use dummies for that, but Tavern Keep sentries just refuse to hit them, so off to some skeletons we go. And well, I would love to give you some numbers here and do a more in-depth comparison, but the more I used them, the more apparent it became that they are all shit. But if you really want to use these guys, it all ends up at what type of attack you want. Single target, slow but piercing, damage over time, short range area attack, or high DPS to walking enemies. Also, I just noticed it while testing, but explosive trap is pretty fun to use and I may actually try to use that the next time I play. Even if comparing the DPS of these weapons don't make much of a sense, we can still do a test to see if Houndius Shootius is useful to have in boss fights. I have fought against two bosses with summoner gear, with and without the sentry active, to see if it will have an impact on the fight. Let's first go over Queen Bee results. This is with the toothpicks summoned and this is without. If you are asking this banana's completely honest opinion, there is no shot Houndius Shootius makes an actual 30-second difference. Queen Bee loves to go wild in her fight, so the timing can change based on how calm she is while she is getting whipped. So a better approach is to simply check a boss who likes to stay in one place, such as Deerclops itself. The timings here make much more sense to me and shows that the slight DPS boost from Houndius Shootius can make a difference. It doesn't look super flashy, but it seems this eyeball can actually help. Now, boss fights aren't everything. Most of the game, especially pre-hard mode, is spent doing other stuff. And if you are going to use a sentry, it is best to do it there. When you are farming things like obsidian rows to make Terra Spark boots, or rotten chunks to make some stuff, or anything really, you will be staying in the same area for a long time and Houndius Shootius will be a good help to killing stuff faster. And when the Skyblock seed drops in the next update, we may see the use of sentries in an AFK farming, but that will be for another day. All the stuff we talked about now might be things that you already know or don't care about, but let me show you the last trick up this weapon sleeve. This. Not clear enough? Then look at this. And this. And this. The most powerful thing about Houndius Shootius isn't the hounding nor the shooting. It is being able to summon it anywhere on the screen and seeing the ores in the wall or empty spaces of a cave. This is something I need early game, mid game, even late game. If it was a guaranteed drop from Deerclops, I would immediately make an arena at the start of the game and throw myself at it just to get this item. There is of course a mana cost, but who cares when you can see around so early in the game. Terraria having a crossover with Don't Starve is an incredible thing, and whether sentries are useful or not, I think we can all agree that Houndius Shootius looks amazing. I don't think I would really farm for it for its DPS, but if you get it from the boss, there's no reason not to use it in the fights. I'd definitely spam it underground for the vision though. 1.4.5 seems to be bringing a lot of good stuff for summoners. Relogic even announced some new modifiers for the class just last week, so who knows, maybe sentries will get some love too. Maybe we will even get a few new sentries. But what do you think of Houndius Shootius? Did you know about its map revealing ability? Would that make you consider farming for it? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more Terraria content. See you in the next video, and as always, have a great day.